Hello everybody, welcome back to 89 Games. I'm here again with another Gloomhaven guide, this time for the Spellweaver. Probably one of my favorite beginning classes just because of how powerful she can be. But let's go ahead and jump in. Now we're going to start with the level 1 cards. Now I did do a beginner's guide which you can check out up here at the top. I will have a link there if you want to check that out. But I'm going to go ahead and cover all the level 1 cards again and go all the way through, talk about some items, do a complete guide. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start with the level 1 cards with Fire Orbs. And then before we get talking about that card, let's just talk quickly about the Spellweaver and strategies around using her, and it'll make more sense as you see more of these cards. But in my opinion, my humble opinion, I believe that the Spellweaver is definitely a glass cannon, burn bright, burn fast type of character. You cannot be afraid to use burn cards and play the Spellweaver. Her whole character is built around using burns and then recovering those burned cards to use them again. So as a beginning player myself, I had a hard time getting used to the idea that burns are okay to use. And honestly, if you find yourself starting to use them a little bit more strategically when they make sense, you can become a lot more powerful and clear scenarios a lot faster. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into Spellweaver. So Fire Orbs here is an attack 3, range 3, target 3. You gain 1 XP for each targeted, and then you get to activate fire, which can be useful for some of the Spellweaver's other abilities later on. But as we just talked about, this is a burn. Now this is a very powerful burn, and honestly this is probably a card that I use about 70% of the time on turn 1 if there are 3 enemies for me to target. Because again, we're going to get these burns back. And in my opinion, if you don't use your burns, you try to play the stamina game with a Spellweaver, your Spellweaver will be very ineffective, underpowered, and not very useful. You're better off just using the burns, clearing rooms as quickly as possible, and yeah, your Spellweaver might burn out before the last couple of turns, but usually by then you've done enough damage, you've cleared enough of the scenario that your remaining characters can finish off no problem. So, the one caveat with Fire Orbs here, though, is to make sure that you are targeting 3. If you're targeting less than 3, it's suboptimal, and then you're kind of wasting it. So make sure that you do have 3 targets to use, and then also use something like a Power Potion, which we'll talk about later under the item section. But like a Power Potion, Eagle Eye Goggles, it makes this even more powerful and more useful. The bottom is a move 3, which is a move 3 is pretty good. It will keep up with everybody else generally on a scenario. So nice little move there on the bottom as well. And this one is an initiative 69. Now talking about initiative for the Spellweaver, there are a lot of higher ones and then a few lower ones. So kind of playing like the Scoundrel did in a way where we have our earlier initiatives to go early if we need to get out of there, or maybe to finish an enemy off, and then a lot of later ones to make sure that we don't get targeted. Because the Spellweaver does only have 6 health, and she has only 8 cards in her hand. So taking damage, and especially if you have to burn cards, is very, very bad for the Spellweaver. You don't want to do that if you can avoid it. Now, moving on to the Impaling Eruption. Impaling Eruption is an attack 3, range 4, and then you target all enemies on the path to the primary target. You gain XP for each targeted. This one activates grass. I say grass. Technically, I believe it's earth, but you're going to hear me say grass. Get used to it. I just call it grass because that's what me and my gaming group have always called it. Now, anyway, moving on. Impaling Eruption. So this one is similar to Fire Orbs, except it's a little harder to use because instead of having just a flat, hey, target 3 within a range, you actually have to make a line of 4 connected tiles, and that's where the damage is done. So you can hit 4 enemies with this, but it can be difficult to do that. Usually, I'll hit 3 with it, which I think is doing pretty good, and plus that keeps you from being adjacent to an enemy as well. So this one can be a little harder to use, but it's still just as powerful if properly buffed like Fire Orbs. And then the bottom on it is a move 4, which is, again, it's a really good move. The Spellweaver does have some mobility, which is nice for getting in and out of tight spots quickly. And then the initiative 70, again, a late initiative for avoiding being targeted. And then we move on to Reviving Ether. Now, Reviving Ether is the essential card for the Spellweaver. You do not want to burn this card in any other way other than actually by using it. You don't want to have to use it to negate damage. You don't want to forget that you have it. Like, do not lose this card. This card is what allows you to bring all your burned cards back and keep the Spellweaver in the game a little bit longer. So the top recovers all of your burned cards. So every card that you burned comes back with the use of this card, and plus you activate Darkness. Now, you cannot recover this card. So once you burn Reviving Ether, even if you have a way to recover cards some other way, which the Spellweaver does get one of those later on, you cannot actually recover the Recover Burned Cards card. You can't make an endless loop. So this card will bring back Fire Orbs, Impaling Eruption, all your burns that you use, and then you can again, of course, use them again. Very powerful. Do not lose this card. The bottom is a move 4 jump, which is very good for getting out of those traps or around certain enemies, and just good for mobility again. And you want to wait to use this card, Reviving Ether, until you have burned every card that you're going to burn. You know, don't use this after, oh, I burned 2 cards, I'm going to use this now. No. You need to wait until after you've burned as many cards as possible. After you've taken a couple rests, you used your burns, everything but maybe 2 cards in your hand now is all burned. That's when you use this to increase your longevity and keep the Spellweaver fighting longer. So now we'll move on to Freezing Nova. Freezing Nova is a melee attack for the Spellweaver, which I absolutely hate. I do not like the idea of using the Spellweaver in melee. I do not usually take this card with me because it's an attack 2, target all adjacent enemies, immobilize, which is good, can be good. And then if you have Frost, it activates another +1 to the attack. And then the bottom is a heal 4, range 4, activate light, burn. So if you need a healer in the party, you know, you could use this heal 4, but I don't like the idea of using a burn for a heal when, you know, other characters have like heal 3s that aren't burns. So it is powerful though because it has that range. But again, this is a melee card, and I do not like the idea of playing melee with a Spellweaver. I think I have used this card once or twice before in a situation where maybe I used the Cloak of Invisibility, so my Spellweaver was invisible, so I didn't have to worry about retaliatory attacks on the next turn. But in general, I do not use this card. I don't like the idea of putting the Spellweaver into danger. There is a way, which we'll talk about it when we get to that card, there is kind of a way you can do that for 1 or 2 turns. That makes sense. But generally, you're going to be attacking from range. So this is usually one that I swap out for one of the X cards. So moving on now to Mana Bolt is an initiative 7. So this one's a really early initiative to help us to get going quickly if we need to. The top is an attack 2, range 3, and then you can consume any element to add +1 to the attack and get an experience point. So Mana Bolt is your basic go-to attack. You know, you don't have any of your burns left to do, or none of the burns make sense. If you've got an element out there, this is a great attack 3, range 3, very good card. And again, this is why this is a good one to use after using Fire Orbs or Impaling Eruption, because you'll have an element to burn to get the extra attack out of it. And then the bottom is a heal 3, range 1. Now, range 1 isn't that great because it's a good heal for yourself. It's harder to heal your allies, though, because you're not often going to be right next to them, probably playing as a Spellweaver since you're playing from range. But a heal 3 that's reusable, it's not a burn, is always nice. So then we move on to Frost Armor. Now, this is where I was talking about possibly putting the Spellweaver into a dangerous area for a turn or 2. So the top is another attack 2, range 3, and you add attack and experience points if you burn an element. So the same thing as Mana Bolt, just a little bit slower initiative. So again, a good basic go-to attack, especially if you have that element. Now, the bottom is, and on the next 2 sources of damage to you, you suffer no damage instead. So this is straight damage negation for 2 different attacks. It is a burn, and then it activates Frost. So this is the card that you might activate this to, like, you might move up to an enemy, or rather, maybe an enemy's moved up to you. You use this, and then you can use your melee attack. You're not going to take damage for a couple turns. So this is the only time, like, the combination of this and then Freezing Nova, especially since Freezing Nova uses that ice that you would generate from activating Frost Armor, if you, of course, activated Frost Armor on the previous turn. So this might be a activate this, and then you move up, you attack with Freezing Nova, and then you'll probably take a couple hits since you moved up. That'll take this Frost Armor away, but then on the next turn, you move away. That's the only situation where, so these 2 cards are a good combo. Playing this one on, you know, turn 1, say, or whatever, and then turn 2, you play Freezing Nova. So that is where this could be useful, if you do this combo. And plus, it's just nice to have that little extra assurance, too, for negating 2 sources of damage, which is nice for the Spellweaver to have, just in case you mess up and she gets in a dangerous situation, she's not going to get taken out. So we'll move on now to Flame Strike. Flame Strike is an attack 3, range 2. If you have fire, you wound. So not quite as good as the others because it has less range, but it is already an attack 3 without having to burn an element to get there. If you do have fire, you can make it wound, which wound is basically makes this more or less attack 4, because as long as the enemy doesn't heal, they're going to take damage from that wound and then continue to take damage from that wound. The bottom is a nice attack 2, range 2, so it's a bottom attack that also has range. This is great if you don't need to move. You can double up on an enemy, maybe hit him with Mana Bolt, and hit him for 2 or 3 damage there, and then Flame Strike for 5, finish off a weaker enemy. Really nice having that attack on the bottom for some utility. And then this is a meh initiative with 36, not really good for much, so you probably wouldn't want to play this one for its initiative. And then the bottom, the last one here of the level 1 cards, Ride the Wind, which is your loot card on the top, and then the bottom is a move 8 jump and activates Wind, which is a burn. I don't like, as much as I said burn hot with a Spellweaver, I don't like the idea of a move 8 jump burn. Unless you're playing a scenario very specific where, hey, you need a big move, then it makes sense. But in general, the move 8 with jump is overkill, and I don't think it's really worth burning the card for it. So Ride the Wind is another one that I usually take out and throw in another card. So let's talk about those other cards. We'll move into the X cards. So Crackling Air, on your next 4 attacks, you add +1 attack. If you have Wind, it's 2 attack instead. So this is a situation where maybe you'd want to use Ride the Wind to activate that Wind, but again, that's a lot of, it's kind of a waste, because I don't think we had anything else that activated Wind in level 1. No, we do not. So the only way for Spellweaver on her own, yeah, would be to use Ride the Wind. But if you're playing with the Brute, he activates Wind quite a bit, so you could get your Wind out of that if you wanted to use this card. Now this is another burn, but you know, a +1 attack on your next 4 attacks, that could be really powerful. You combine that with something like Fire Orbs, and then throw in a Power Potion, and now we're talking attack 5, attack 6 if we have Wind on 3 different targets. It's pretty good. And then the bottom is a move 3. If you have fire, it's retaliate 2 for yourself. Now again, that would be putting the Spellweaver in a dangerous situation. However, if you activated Frost Armor, went in, used Freezing Nova, and then you also at some point activated this, now you have retaliate 2 for a round while you're up, not taking damage because you have Frost Armor on, and then Crackling Air, you know, you're retaliating for 2. So could be a good combo to use there, but this is one that I usually do not put in my hand. Although to be fair, again, this is one of those situations of a card I've never really used personally, so I think I've seen someone else use it, and it is useful. It is useful if you want to play it that way, for sure. And then Initiative 25 isn't too bad for going a little earlier, but it's still not great. And then the next one, we'll move on to Hardened Spikes here. This is a Retaliate 2, affect self and all adjacent allies. Consume grass to make it +1 more retaliate, get an experience point, 2 experience points, and it's a bird. Now this only plays out for 1 round, but I could see a situation where this might be useful, but generally it's not going to be, so probably not a great card to carry with you all the time. And remember that aura abilities affect adjacent allies, or rather, if they're adjacent to you when this effect would happen. So if an ally starts adjacent to you and you use an aura ability and then they walk away from you on their turn, they no longer get the benefit of the aura. They have to be adjacent to you to get it. Now, if they start not adjacent to you and move adjacent to you, then they get the aura for that turn. So that's important to remember. Don't think that you get to activate this and then, oh, everyone has retaliate now and I can move them wherever I want. It's not how it works. They have to be adjacent to the Spellweaver when they get attacked for the retaliate to actually happen. Now, the bottom of this one is a move 3, which, again, move 3, not bad. And then Consume Frost to make yourself shield for 2 for the round. So, not a bad little defensive card, again, if you can kind of find yourself in a tight spot. And then, finally, I don't think I usually take either of these 2 cards and replace anything. So, some of these cards I mentioned replacing are probably level 2s, where I take them out. Except for the next one, Aid from the Ether, I do take that one. Aid from the Ether, a lot better than you might think. It's like, oh, you summon an ally. You know, allies are typically kind of dumb and not useful. But that's not true. Certain ones are if you know how to play them. So Aid from the Ether, top is a heal 3, range 3. Great for giving a little support to your team. Plus with range 3, it's a little more useful than the earlier one that was only range 1. But the bottom, I usually, again, this is another turn 1 card. I've had games where on turn 1, I burned Fire Orbs and I burned Aid from the Ether. So, Summon Mystic Ally. She has 2 health, 2 move, 2 range, 3 attack. 3 attack is really good for a summons. And it's range, which means the summons will generally keep itself out of danger. As long as your allies are melee and they're up there next to the enemies, then we'll keep our ally here alive. But here's the part that makes this one really great, is that eventually you play this early on, so that way when your ally does eventually get killed, when you use Reviving Ether, you get to bring it back. That's what makes this one so much better than a lot of the others, is the fact that you can bring it back a second time, and it can continue to do that attack 3, which again, really good, and it uses your modifier deck. So once your modifier deck is decked out and a lot better, then the Mystic Ally is really, really powerful. So I usually do take that one. And for the sake of argument, I didn't do this in the last video, but let's try to just kind of take out the cards so you can see what my build might look like at level 9. Now, I can't guarantee this is always what I would do, but we'll just go with kind of the general idea as we move through these cards here. So that finishes off level 1 and X cards. So let's go ahead and do our first level up and talk about the level 2 cards. So at level 2, the Spellweaver is going to get Flashing Burst and Icy Blast. So Flashing Burst is an attack 3, range 3, activates light, and then the bottom is a move 4. This is a good all-around useful card. An attack 3, range 3, it activates an element, move 4. You know, this is really good in general. The initiative's not bad at 26. And then Icy Blast. Icy Blast is an attack 2, range 3, muddle all enemies in the area. Activate Frost, gain 2 XP, burn. And then the bottom is a heal 6, range 2, burn. So Icy Blast is one that I don't typically take. I think I have experimented with it before, but I usually take the safe bet here and go with Flashing Burst, just because this is a pretty good all-around attack, and it does allow you to kind of stay in the game a little bit longer, even though you're doing a lot of burning of cards, because this one isn't a burn. Icy Blast, however, could be useful against some of those maps that have a lot of weaker swarm enemies, because you could hit, you know, attack 2, like a bunch of Vermlings or something that have lower HP. Attack 2 in this pattern with range 3, you can hit a lot of them with that, and with a power up of a power potion or something like that, this could be attack 3. You could take out a lot of enemies with this. Plus, anything that survives is muddled, giving you an advantage on the defense. So, not bad all around. Again, and then the bottom, a heal 6 for a burn. At least this one's range 2. Again, unless you just really, really need a healer in the party, I would probably not use that card. So I think, for sake of argument, this time we're going to go with the Flashing Burst. Take that card, add it to our repertoire here, and then I'm going to take something like Frost Armor, probably, or not Frost Armor, Freezing Nova. I would take Freezing Nova out, and I'd put Flashing Burst in. In this scenario, again, it depends. If I didn't have a healing character, I might keep this in for the heals, even though they are a burn. But I will probably not, if I'm playing by myself and choosing my own party, I'm going to have someone else in there for healing. I'm not going to use a Spellweaver for it because it's really not her forte. So let's go ahead and move on to level 3 now. At level 3, we're going to pick up Cold Fire or Elemental Aid. So Cold Fire is actually a really good one because you have ways to activate both these elements, and that can make this from attack 1, range 3, in that 3 triangular pattern there. You could turn it into an attack 3, range 3, and stun if you've got the fire and the ice to power it up. Anything that stuns, especially anything that does damage and stuns, is extremely powerful. Some people can overlook sometimes, I think, the power of stun and other status effects and control effects. Control can be really, really powerful if you know how to use it. Using this stun on a group of enemies that you know attacks and hits really hard, or that heals a lot and you don't want them to heal, you know, stunning that enemy and giving your team a chance to kind of recover and worry about wiping something else out is really good. You know, when you stun enemies, you're taking a turn away from them, and turn management is really a lot of what Gloomhaven is about, and getting the maximum use out of your turns. So if you deprive your enemy of using a turn, it's a win. It's always a win. So I do like Cold Fire. The bottom is a loot 2 burn. I don't like that. So this is kind of a 50-50. The top's really great. The bottom's not so great. And then on the other one is Elemental Aid, which we get another heal card. So again, if we're going to play the heal game with her, you can heal 3 at range 2. If you have grass, it's another 2 heal, so heal 5, which is a pretty strong heal. The bottom is a shield 2, affect any one ally. If you have wind, it's all allies. And this does not have a range associated with it, which means you can just shield anybody wherever they are on the map. They don't have to be adjacent to you. They don't have to be within a range. It's just an automatic shield for anybody in your party. So great defensive card here with the heal and the shield. So again, if that's the route you're going with the Spellweaver, I could see why you would take Elemental Aid. But when I have to go between these two, I'm always going for, again, like I said, Spellweaver, the way I play her, Burn Hot, Burn Bright, and Room Exploder. That's how I play her. So I'm going to go with Cold Fire here. And then we're probably going to take out something like, I might even take out Impaling Eruption for this one, just because it's a little harder to use, even though it can be powerful. It's either that, or you have to take out something like Flame Strike. You got to remember that this has a useless bottom. So we might take out, because this consumes fire, and this one would be a consume fire one, take out Flame Strike, put Cold Fire in. I know I'm losing that bottom attack, but in my experience, I don't get to use it too often, because it is a range 2. So it's kind of situational that you actually be close enough without having to move to use that. So that's what we're going to do for level 3. Moving on to level 4 now. So we're going to pick up either Spirit of Doom or Forked Beam. Now, Spirit of Doom is a curse, range 4. If you consume darkness, kill 1 normal enemy instead. I know I talked about this with the Scoundrel. Killing enemies outright, very, very powerful. Do not underestimate it. In this one, there's no health requirement. They could have 10 health. A normal enemy that has 10 health, something like an Earth Demon or something, instant kill, taken out. It is a burn, but it does kill them. And then the bottom is a heal X, affect any ally where X is half of that ally's maximum hit point value rounded down. So you heal them for half HP, basically. And then if you consume light, it's their maximum hit point value instead. So this is a great heal, but again, a burn, and that's not how we're playing this, or not how I would play it normally, the Spellweaver. And then on Forked Beam is another one of those safe cards. Attack 2, range 3, target 2. It's pretty good. That's pretty good. Plus an XP experience point for it. And then the bottom is a move 4. This is a really good all-arounder card. So if we have to pick between these two, I do like Spirit of Doom. I do like being able to kill a normal enemy. However, the only thing that we have to activate darkness with, I believe, is our Reviving Ether. And yes, it is. So the only way to really get use out of this would be one time after using Reviving Ether. On the next turn, you could use this. So that means the first time you use it, you're only using it for a curse, range 4. Not good for a burn. Not good at all for a burn. The second time you're using it, you would get to kill the one enemy. So as much as I do like the insta-kills, since this one is so very limited in its uses, I think I'm going to have to go with the Forked Beam this time. And then Forked Beam is going to replace Impaling Eruption and put in Forked Beam. Because I'm going to get that attack 2 versus an attack 3, plus this one, target 2. Impaling Eruption is hard to use, like I said. So this one will be a lot easier to use because I can just target 2 enemies. And it doesn't go away. Plus, it also still has the move 4 on the bottom, like Impaling Eruption. So that's probably what I'm going to do here. I know it's looking like I'm taking a lot of burn cards out. So we still have Fire Orbs, and we still have like the bottom of Frost Armor. So our Spellweaver, as she levels up, she's getting more of these cards that she doesn't have to burn that are still powerful. So it's kind of changing, in the first level 1, level 2, it's Burn Hot. Now, as we get to higher level cards, there'll be some more I'll probably end up adding in here. But again, don't be afraid to burn, especially as you level up and you get more of these cards that you don't have to burn. Do not be afraid of burning Fire Orbs, the bottom of Frost Armor, because you have these other cards that you don't have to burn that are also very powerful. So let's move on to level 5. At level 5, we get either Chromatic Explosion or Engulfed in Flames. So Chromatic Explosion is going to give us an attack 3, range 3 in the triangle pattern, experience 2, and it activates every element. And then the bottom is a move 2, activate any element that we want. So very, very useful card. The bottom, or the other one, is Engulfed in Flames, attack 4, range 3, activate fire. Very good basic use card. On the next 5 melee attacks targeting you, for the bottom, on the next 5 melee attacks targeting you, you get Retaliate 3. So again, if you're going to play the up close and personal build, then, I mean, Retaliate 3 is really strong, but again, the Spellweaver is not great at surviving up close without, I mean, the only thing we really have to mitigate it right now would be the bottom of not Freezing Nova, but Frost Armor. So I don't like the idea of the Retaliate one for her. I think it's a little bit risky play. It's a riskier way to play. Chromatic Explosion, I am probably gonna be the one I would take here. And the top is a burn, but an attack 3, range 3, and a group of enemies like that. And plus it activates any element that we need. So if we have a big play and we need a specific element to make it work, this is a great way to get that, or multiple elements. And plus, depending on our party composition, activating these other elements could help our party too, which gives us a super powered, elemental powered turn on the next turn. And then the bottom is also very good for activating just whatever element that we or our party may need. So Engulfed in Flames is the safer card here for the reusable attack, but the bottom I don't find much use out of. This one I would use both sides of the card. So let's take the Chromatic Explosion. And then as far as what to take out, now we're getting to a point where we're probably looking at taking Mana Bolt or Frost Armor out for adding in Chromatic Explosion. And now we're getting into harder decisions of moving the different cards in. So we might come back to that here in a little bit. So for now, let's go ahead and move on to the next level. So level 6, we pick up either Living Torch or Frozen Knight. So Living Torch is attack 4, range 3, immobilize, and then if we consume light, all enemies adjacent to the target will suffer 2 damage, gain 1 XP. That's a really powerful card that is not a burn on top, so very, very good. The bottom of this one, though, is the reason I take this card. Summon Burning Avatar. Health 3, move 3, range 3, attack 2, and activates fire every time it attacks, and when it dies, it attacks 3 all adjacent enemies. This is an upgrade to the Aid from the Ether. So Aid from the Ether, the biggest difference here is that the range and movement go up for the Living Torch for the Burning Avatar, but the attack power does go down by 1. However, you're activating fire every time, so anything that you have that you can use fire, like your Mana Bolt or the top of Frost Armor, or anything else that needs fire, cold fire, you'll be able to use it basically every turn because your summons will always be activating fire. Very, very powerful if you're using anything that has fire, that gives an added bonus to. So definitely going to take that one probably, but let's go ahead and look at Frozen Knight. So Frozen Knight is an attack 4, you gain XP for each enemy targeted, activates Frost, it is a burn, and you attack in that pattern where you can hit 5, and it can later be upgraded to hit a couple more in the back there. So again, this is like a melee attack though. You have to be up close, or at least within range 2, to hit things with this. So not generally the way I play the Spellweaver. And then the bottom is a move 3. If you consume darkness, get 2 more movement and become invisible. So I will say, if you're playing the more of a melee, risky build that we talked about with like the bottom of Engulfed Flames here, then being able to go invisible is really good for going up there, doing a bunch of retaliate damage and taking the hits, and then going invisible to keep yourself safe when you're down to like 1 or 2 health. And also just in general for like a safe place to go and be able to hit things and not worry about being able to be retaliated against. Like using something like the bottom of Frozen Knight here with the darkness, you could go invisible, you move 5, you move into a middle of a group of enemies where you can get really good use out of fire orbs and hit them all, and then be safe until the next turn when you can move away. But again, we only have one thing that activates darkness, well, 2 now, since we took Chromatic Explosion. So kind of hard to get the extra benefit out of that unless you're playing with another character who's activating darkness for you. So I'm going to take Living Torch here every time, and then Living Torch, of course, as we discussed, will replace Aid from the Ether. Okay, and then we're going to move on to level 7. At level 7, Twin Restoration or Stone Fists. So Twin Restoration is the card you're going to take. And I say that because it's another recover card. You don't have to, but if you want to have that longevity for the Spellweaver and be able to use more burn cards without having to worry about it, Twin Restoration is going to allow you to recover 2 of your burned cards, which is really useful for throwing in an extra few turns, especially if, let's say, you use Fire Orbs and Frost Armor, or Fire Orbs and Living Torch on turn 1. On turn 2, you go ahead and use Twin Restoration and get those 2 cards back, and then, well, you wouldn't get Living Torch back because your avatar would still be out there. So, bad example, but you get the idea. You get 2 cards back immediately, and then you could use them again immediately, or just hang on to them and get the extra turns out of them. So Twin Restoration is very good. Now, it is important to note that that extra little icon next to the burn card icon down there is the one telling you that you cannot recover a non-recoverable card. So, for instance, Twin Restoration cannot give you Reviving Ether back, and Reviving Ether cannot give you Twin Restoration back. So you're only going to get to use Twin Restoration once, but it does give you 2 cards back, which is better than getting 1 back. So very good for extending your play. The bottom is also a useful card for heal 3, range 3, and target 2. Very good little multi-heal card there. So, and then the other card at level 6, or rather level 7, Stone Fist, attack 6, push 2, immobilize. You get 2 XP, it is a burn, and you can burn grass to get 2 extra targets to this. But again, it's a melee attack. Now, it does push, though. So pushing them and then immobilizing them is actually really strong, because now they can't get back to you. If they weren't a ranged character, if they're a melee character, you just pushed them 2 away, they're immobilized, they can't get back to you. So, not bad, if you're playing that kind of melee build idea, but not the way I like to play Spellweaver. The bottom, move 3, shield oneself, and then if you have grass, it's an additional move, an additional shield, and an additional XP. So, and there we go again. This is definitely the melee card. So there is an argument to be made for a melee build for the Spellweaver, and I may just have to play a run where I try to play her that way. I've never done it, and, maybe I shouldn't knock it. I haven't tried it, maybe I shouldn't knock it. But that would be interesting. I think at some point I may do a series where we'll play Gloomhaven, and I will pick all the cards I would never pick, and we'll just see how well that goes. But for today's purposes, we're going to take the Twin Restoration. Now, the hard part is what to take out for Twin Restoration. Probably something that's got heals, since it has heals on it. So we might be taking out Mana Bolt at this point. We have enough other attacks and reusable attacks that I think it's okay to take Mana Bolt out. The only bad thing is we'll lose that Initiative 7, which is our lowest initiative. So if you're okay with that, then you can take Mana Bolt out. If not, then you might want to take maybe Frost Armor, but I kind of hate to do that. You could take out Flashing Burst, but I'm going to say Mana Bolt for now. I'm going to add in Twin Restoration. And I promise we'll get back to Chromatic Explosion. I probably should have took out... Honestly, we could probably take out... What do we got? Move 2 on the bottom. It could be a replacement for the level 2 card. I think that's what I'm going to do. I think we're going to say that we took Flashing Burst out and put Chromatic Explosion in. And this could be something we swap out depending on scenarios, So, but that's what we're going to go with for now. So, there it is. Moving on. Level 8. Almost there. Almost to the end. Alright, Zephyr Wings and Cold Front. So, Zephyr Wings is a loot 2, consume wind, loot 3 instead, gain 1 XP, and you may not loot more than 4 gold piles or treasure tiles with this action. So, it's super powerful, but they thought it was a little too powerful, so then they nerfed it by saying you can only get 4 max treasures with it. However, it is not a burn. And as I've said before, these loot 2s, or in this case, possibly loot 3, that's not a burn, might just be worth taking, especially if you need the money for your character. That is really powerful to be able to use this multiple times. The bottom is move 8 with jump. If you have wind, it makes it move 3, and you get an additional experience point. You get 1 experience point base, and then you get 1 more if you consume wind. It's a burn, but it's basically an upgrade to, what was it, Ride the Wind's bottom? Yeah, Ride the Wind. That's what this is. Zephyr Wings is a straight up upgrade to Ride the Wind. So if you've been using the Ride the Wind because you like the jump and the move 8 and the loot, then Zephyr Wings, an easy replacement right there. But the other one is Cold Front, and I think this is the one that I normally take. Cold Front is an attack 5, range 2 with a straight line pattern hitting all those enemies in a line. 2 experience, activates Frost. Yeah, this one's a really good attack. I mean, it's attack 5 and range 2, which means I don't have to be right next to the enemy. And then, of course, since this has the 5 in a line pattern, it's technically range 7. You can hit an enemy 7 away, but you'd want to be able to hit at least a couple more enemies in that line along the way, since this is a burn. But this is a very good straight line attack where you could probably hit 2-3 enemies with it. You'd want to hit probably at least 3 to make it worth it, but depending on the situation, 2 might be okay. But a pretty good attack, and it's another burn. And then the bottom is the next 3 sources of damage from attacks targeting you. You suffer no damage, and instead gain retaliate 3 at range 3. So this is a more or less straight upgrade to Frost Armor. Because instead of just suffering no damage for the next 2 attacks on us, now we're not suffering damage from the next 3 attacks, plus we're retaliating range 3 for 3. So this is very, very powerful. I'm going to take Cold Front, and I'm going to replace Frost Armor. Frost Armor now goes away, Cold Front comes in. Now, you can kind of see that my initiative, as I've picked these cards, gets really, really terrible. Really, really late initiatives. But that's generally okay for the way I play the Spellweaver, because I play her high initiative anyway to keep her from being targeted most of the time. And if we start to look at these cards, I mean, we only have, we've got about 4 or 5 cards that are in the 20s, 1 that's a 7, and that's it for quick initiatives. So in general, the Spellweaver's meant to play a little bit later anyhow. So not really terrible that your initiatives are this late if you're, kind of playing the ranged build like I am. Okay, level 9. At level 9, we're going to have our ultimate cards here. Black Hole and Inferno. So, Black Hole is an attack for range 3. You gain experience point for each enemy targeted. And then if you have darkness, you kill all normal enemies in the targeted area, and you get that little triangle pattern there. So, this one, if you got that darkness activated, really, really good for taking out a little group of normal enemies. Just boom, just delete them. The bottom is a choose a hex within range 4, pull 2, target all enemies within range 4 of the chosen hex and pull them towards it. So this is a good little control card, depending on the party you're using, and maybe you need to set up a nice attack for someone else, or even for yourself. If you think about it, if you use the bottom of Black Hole here and you pull everyone towards a central point, then something like Cold Fire makes a lot of sense, because you can definitely hit 3 people with it, or something like Chromatic Explosion. So bottom Black Hole could be really useful paired with the proper top. Inferno is the other card here. We get attack 3, target all enemies in the same room as you. If you have fire, it's +1 attack and XP, and then all allies in the same room suffer 2 damage. So this is a explode the room type of attack. And if your allies can take the 2 damage, which they probably can, power this up with the major or super. I forget which one's the more powerful version of the power potion. So you're adding, like, I believe it's +3 attack. So you could attack 6 plus other buffs, it could be more, and hit everything in the room. And guess what? This one isn't a burn. So very, very, very powerful card here. The bottom is Retaliate 2, Retaliate range 3, and affects self and all allies. So again, also another very powerful Retaliate there for the bottom. Plus we get a better initiative out of this one with a 19. So I think out of these, honestly, I think Inferno's more useful, because again, yeah, we can kill the normal enemies, but we don't have that many ways to activate darkness, and they would have to be in this specific little pattern, where with Inferno, we can go ahead and just attack 3, everything in the room, no problem. Attack 4 if we have fire. So I think I'm going to pick Inferno. We take Inferno, it attacks everything in the room, so you know what? We're probably finally taking fire orbs out, putting Inferno in, and there we have it. So let's take a look at my build here and see if I did any good. Without playing it, sometimes these cards change, depending on scenarios that we're playing and stuff. It wouldn't necessarily always be all the level cards picked, but that's what I did here. So let's just look. Of course, we got Reviving Ether for getting all our burned cards back. We got to move 4 there, and I'm concerned about movement. Cold Fire, there's no movement there. Forked Beam, we got some movement there. Chromatic Explosion, movement with a benefit. Living Torch has no movement, no movement. So yeah, we do have a problem here with this build, and it is that we have hardly any movement. So it is possible that I may have to do something like swap in Flashing Burst and take another card out. Maybe Chromatic Explosion, or not Twin Restoration. It would just really depend on the scenarios, and I may play it this way too. If you give her some boots and just use basic moves, you'd probably be okay, because we've got 2 move 4s, and then we'd have basic move. So there's also items to give you turn your basic move into a move 3. So something like that, then you could still play with this build and it would work really well. But as far as burns, we only have Reviving Ether, and we have Kinetic Explosion, Living Torch, Twin Restoration, Cold Front, Inferno. So you can see as we level up, I didn't take all burns. Like in the beginning, we have a lot more burns starting out. As you level up, you get a lot of powerful cards that you can use that are not burns. So it can extend the Spellweaver's life. But I'd still recommend keep burns in your hand. Whatever burns you have, 2 or 3 burns, and don't be afraid to use them as soon as possible, as soon as they make sense, because you're going to get them back with Reviving Ether. So do not be afraid to burn with the Spellweaver. Okay, now with that said, let's go ahead and move over to our item discussion for the Spellweaver. Okay, so for items for the Spellweaver, for the helmet item, we're definitely going to go, especially in the very beginning, you're going to want to pick up the Eagle Eye Goggles. But Eagle Eye Goggles are going to give you that advantage on an entire attack action that comes back after your rests. So this is the card, whenever you're going to use a burn card, you want to throw out the Eagle Eye Goggles on whatever that first burn is. So in the beginning, that's going to be Fire Orbs more often than not. You're going to want to use Eagle Eye Goggles to make sure you don't miss on any of those attacks, which really helps increase your damage and make sure you don't waste those burn cards. So Eagle Eye Goggles are definite, and probably going to keep that through the entire game, honestly, with Spellweaver through her entire career. Although there is another item I believe you can get later on that is... Nope, that just increases attack range. So yeah, we're just going to take Eagle Eye Goggles and probably keep those the entire length of Spellweaver's career. And then we move over to the armor. I always take Cloak of Invisibility because it's helpful for, again, moving up into the middle of a group of enemies, using one of our big area attacks, and then on the next turn we can move away, and then they can't attack us because we're invisible. So I do like taking Cloak of Invisibility for armor for her. And then when we go over to the weapons, in the beginning, starting out, the one that's going to make the most sense to me is the Piercing Bow, which gives you... Now this one burns, it goes away once you use it, but it does ignore shield value for an entire attack action. So you're on that scenario that's got a lot of shielded enemies. This is a way for the Spellweaver to use Fire Orbs or Impaling Eruption or any of her other big multi-attacks and get straight through the shields and kill enemies. And usually shielded enemies, a lot of them have lower health values. So this is a great way to wipe out a bunch of shielded enemies, especially in like a first room. And it saves the rest of your party a bunch of turns and time trying to take out these enemies and get through their shields. So Piercing Bow, definitely the one I would take for the hand item. And then for boots, like we talked about, as we get later in the build that I did, we had very little movement. So we're definitely going to want to take something like our Boots of Striding for the extra movement early on probably. But later on, you can get the Comfortable Shoes, and that's what I was talking about. So it turns our basic moves into move 3s. So that takes care of your movement problem right there. Once all your basic moves are move 3s, you shouldn't have any trouble keeping up with your party, getting in a range of most enemies. Shouldn't be a problem. So that's the upgrade I would take after, Boots of Striding. It gives us movement for 1 turn, but this one's going to give us constant movement. And I think there may even be an upgrade to the Comfortable Shoes too that gives you another. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Serene Sandals. Eventually you get those at higher levels, and then you can move 4 instead of 2. So movement doesn't become a problem anymore for the Spellweaver with some of these shoe items. And then finally, for our bag items, so we talked about Minor Power Potion. That is definitely the one I would take first to add power to those multi-attacks. It really makes a Spellweaver clear rooms. You can clear rooms very quickly with the Spellweaver if you properly power up your attacks. So I would take the Minor Potion, Power Potion for sure. The next item I might pick up once I can carry more than one would be a Stamina Potion to make Spellweaver last a little longer, since we are trying to use a lot of burns and we only have 8 cards in our hand. And then of course you can upgrade to the more powerful versions, the Major, which there wasn't any super. I don't know what I was thinking. I said super Power Potion, but there is Major Power Potion, so we can get +2 attack to an entire attack action with that one. So that would be an upgrade, obviously, for the Minor eventually. Although, pro tip here, you can't carry 2 of the same item on one character, but a Major Potion and a Minor Potion are not the same item. So you can carry a minor potion and the major potion of the same kind and have them both equipped. The game will let you do that. So now I've got +1 for one attack, and I've got +2 for another attack. So this is definitely something that I would do with the Spellweaver at the later levels to get that extra damage out of my multi-attacks. So that covers the items. Now let's jump over finally to our perk selection. So for the Spellweaver, again, now all characters follow the basic same rules that we talked about with the Scoundrel. So we're going to add any special modifiers that modify, like not taking scenario effects or not taking negative modifiers from armor. But the Spellweaver, I don't think has any of those. She does not. So we're going to immediately just start with removing -1s. So if we take out our -1s, and then we can add, she doesn't have a lot of ways to remove negatives, but she does have a lot of ways to add positive cards. And positive cards that do different things. So we're going to go ahead and then add +1 cards. Now I don't take the zeros out because the zeros are still a positive card, right? We're not losing attack value if a 0 comes out. So I like to save dust and remove those 4 cards till I've added more of the other cards first. Granted, taking this out would mean that these others show up more often, but it also means that these will show up more often, even though there's not very many of them. So I've never done the math here. It might actually be better to take this earlier on, but I'm just going to stick with my guns for now and add all the extra positive cards first. So then we've got like +1 wound, curse or immobilize, activate fire, activate ice. These are +2s, so we're definitely going to add the +2s. And our build had a lot of fire use, so +2s there, +2s here to activate ice. And then we're going to go back up, take the stun card. I'm going to take the stun card because stun is awesome, especially when it's accidental and free, when it just pops up as a modifier. It's always very nice. And then we'll add our wound cards here, the hobble, and the +1 curse. And then finally remove our extra zeros. And before the rolling modifiers, there we have very high chance of pulling positives. I mean, we have a ton of positive cards here. We only have 5 negative cards, and we probably have upwards of 10 or 15 positive cards. So there's like a 75% chance you're going to pull something good every time that your deck's fresh. And then we'll take our rollers as our last ones, which just activate some elements for us, which can be useful, especially if you're taking those cards that need a dark. You know, having a roller pop up and activate dark for you so you can use something on the next turn is always very nice. But of course you can't control when this shows up, so little harder to use because of that. But that covers all of our modifiers for the Spellweaver. So hopefully this guide will help you in playing the Spellweaver. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And remember to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and keep on gaming.